Hello, welcome back to the channel. This is a continuation of the video on payload integration with Expo. At this part, we are going to focus on the Expo application. We need to introduce authentication. If you recall, in the current app, it's just a two-tab app. We're pulling back all of the content because we have no authenticated user. So we need to create a structure in the application to allow users to log in to Payload backend, and then for us to be able to identify who that user is so we can control what content is rendered in the application for the user. Now, I'm just going to go over integrating authentication using Expo Router in this application at a very high level. I'm going to discuss it briefly. I'm going to drop the code in, and then we're going to add the payload stuff to the application. I did create a completely separate template that shows how authentication is added to a two-tab app. That's what we're calling this, a two-tab app. So that will be a separate GitHub repo with a documented README that'll explain exactly how that is being done if you want to dive deeper into that. Also, I have at least 2 to 3 videos already on my channel, which I'll include in the link below, on how to implement authentication in Expo Router using the file router. Integrating authentication in an Expo application it takes some getting used to figure out some patterns on how it works. But like I said, I'll just stay high level here. If you already know this part, you can skip ahead. I will put timestamps in so you can skip past this section if you like. All right, so let's get to it. I'm going to try to follow the process in the documentation and kind of explain what I'm doing as I go along. The method that we're going to use is to create these groups. Actually, let me show you the project we're going to use as this is actually the template project. And let's focus mostly over here on the layout so you can kind of see how we're going to do this. What we're going to do to make it work is we're going to create these two groups. We're going to create an app group, which is the whole application, and then we're going to create an auth group. Everything inside of the app group will require authentication for you to access it. Everything inside the auth group will not require it. Right now we just have login, but we need to also add create account. At the top level, you have to account for the context because we'll be using React context to kind of wrap the whole application, and inside of the context, it will keep track of if you're logged in, if you're logged out, who the current user is, and a couple of other things related specifically to your authentication state. But if we go back here to the app, you can see here in the app layout, which will get hit before any other page is rendered, we're going to wrap the whole application in a session provider. And the session provider comes from the context, and we'll kind of go into that later. But the important part is just so you can understand the structure here. So at the top level is this layout that wraps everything. When the application starts up, since these are just groups, all these routes are still at the top level. So it's going to come down and it's going to find this index route here. And when it hits this index route, well, actually, even before it hits this index route, it's going to hit this layout because the layout's in the app. So the way it works is that if you put a layout in this group, this layout will get executed. So if we go in this layout, we can see this is where the session management is. And so we're going to determine if we have a session or not. We're going to determine if we're still loading. If we're still loading, we're just going to show the loading text. If we're not loading anymore, then we'll drop down and we'll determine, do I have a session or not? If I don't have a session, then I'll redirect to my auth group to the login page. So this is my auth group, and here's my login page. Otherwise, I'll just render what I'm supposed to render for the slot. And so basically what that means is it'll drop down and it'll hit this index file. And then once it hits this index file, the index says, oh, I need to redirect to tabs. So then I'll drop into tabs. This is the layout for the whole tab layout. We're not using any sort of authentication guard here. It's the layout for the whole tabs. And then we'll hit this tab index page, which is tab screen 1, and that is what we want. So that's kind of how the flow will work for the application. And then now if we step down inside the context, this context I've already documented a little bit. It's a blank empty one. but you can see the specific information that we want to keep on the context. We want to have a sign in. We want to be able to sign up. We want to be able to sign out. We will have a session object. We will know if you're loading. That's basically when the app is starting up, trying to determine if it has a session or not. And then we have a user object that we'll keep track of. All of these values will be accessed through this use session hook. Here are the functions that we'll be supporting inside the context. This was just some dummy data. Like I said, this is the sample application that you're happy to look at and kind of dig through without all the complexity of Payload or anything. Just for signing in, you just hit the button and I just assign a default email, a fake token. For sign up, the exact same thing. For sign out, I kind of clear everything out. So it's just a small application if you want to get used to how authentication works. So like I said, that's about all I'm going to cover on the setup for authentication. I'm going to take our current application and I'm going to modify our tab structure so that it has this app group. We'll set up our auth group and we will add the context. And then I'll show you the app working with the fake context, and then we'll integrate Payload into our context. All right, so that will be the next part. Okay, so I've added the context in. I have updated the backend. I have updated our application to have the flow, and as you can see, when I reload the page, it takes you to my login screen because I'm not authenticated. I'll do my fake sign in. I'm signed in now, and so now I have access to the rest of the site. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start to bit by bit add in Payload's API to make this work. So let's look at the Payload API. So here's the auth options that we're going to use from the REST API. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to check and see if I have a current user by calling this current user, or basically API user, since users are collection me, and that will let me know if I have a current user. Oh, it's pretty nice. It gives me a nice little code snippet to integrate it. So we'll just keep it simple and we'll copy this code snippet. And let's go back to our code. And what we want to do is, where are we? Down here. So inside of the context, we need to initialize my context inside, and in here where we initialize the context is where I will get the user and get the session information. So let's just drop this. I'll do a little bit of cleanup, but let's just drop the code in here to get us started. All right, we'll just keep this hard coded for now. And our collection is our user collection. And this will return a request. Actually, this probably, let's make another check here just in case. Let's say, no, we're gonna say if request okay. So if I don't have an okay request, throw error. Actually, I'm not going to worry about an error here. If I don't have a request, then I'm just going to clear my authentication state. So I'll basically clear out everything and return. Otherwise, we'll get the JSON from it. And our hope is that in this response, we will get the information that we want for the user. So if we go back, we know this is the response object that we're supposed to get back. And we care about this token, expiration date, and clearly the user object. And so these helper functions that I have, let's take a look at what's going on inside of them. So we're going to modify this response to match this pattern. And so we know we have a user, we have a token, and we have an expiration date. So we are going to change this to, we'll leave that user, and then we'll use these values here that we'll set. So we'll set the user, and in our session, we're going to set our session to be the token and the date to be the response. So now we'll have that information stored in our session. We'll have the user saved. So that's updating our current auth state. And then you can see down here in our clear auth state on logout, we're going to clear all that information out. But the other thing that we need to do, so now that we have our auth state updated, and we did this with our set session and our set user, what should happen is that if we actually do have a user, our state variables here will be set. It'll trigger the session provider. And so then what will happen is that inside of this layout, the session provider wraps the slot. So then what will happen is that when it hits the index page, actually, what will happen is that it will get past this layout. Well, let me make sure I'm setting my isLoading flag. All right. Set isLoading to true to start up the app. And then what should happen is after init is called, we set isLoading to false. So let's see. What we'll do is down here and finally set isLoading to false. So it's not loading anymore. Okay. So then what should happen is that here inside our layout, it's loading. There's no session. So we'll see our loading text. If we don't have a session, it'll redirect to our login, which is here. Otherwise, it should go to our slot, which would then hit our index page, which should then show the tabs. And then what we'll also do is let's inside of our context here, if we have a response, we'll just console log here so that we can see something in our debug log. Network request failed. Let's see, why are we getting a network request fail? Is my backend running? Let's check my backend. Oh, let me get this correct. It's post 3000. Now let's save and let's refresh and see if we get some users. And then let's see if we could get this user information. Let's just put it on tab 2 for now. So let's go back over here and open up tab 2. And for now, we will just put the user information here. And then we'll use our session object. And then we'll import that. And then we can, just for now, just to show it's working, so stringify user. So now let's see what we get when we go to tab 2. Current user null. Why is user null? Let's see, did I miss something? Use session context. Let's go back to my code, see that I set my user properly. So let's go back up to my response. I set my session and I set my user. Oh, interesting. I'm not logged in, but this object is returning something. So I'm doing the wrong check. So let me go back and check appropriately. So this should be if response user, then we set the user information. Otherwise we sign in. All right, that's better. So I have no current user. So next, let's actually add just a quick login UI to this screen here. This is going to be a cut and paste of some code with the styles and everything. Okay, so we have some code dropped in for our sign-in page. And we'll capture an email address, we'll capture a password, click the sign-in button for the action. This is basic React Native. We have our text input field. On change, we're going to set the state variable. So here we're capturing the email, the password. If we get an error message back from our sign-in, we capture it and we log it. And then we get our sign-in method from our use session. Remember, all this is in our context. So let's go back to our context and let's find our sign-in message. So here's our sign-in, calls handle sign-in. And right now, handle sign-in has nothing really, so we're just going to remove this. And what we're going to do is we're going to follow the same approach we did last time with the API. So we're going to come back here, and we got our current user that way. Let's close that, and then now let's get our login. So let's follow the same approach. We're going to copy this code. We're going to come in here. Let's wrap this with our try and catch. So if we get an error, we kind of want to know what it is. And then we want to clear auth state because the login didn't work. All right, and so response, and then a user. That's what we're expecting. And then we need to fix this URL. But we're going to take the email and password that were passed in, And this looks right. Let's give it a, oh, I see some errors. All right, it looks like I'm missing, let me close this out. And I have a UI, and let's see if we can get in. Actually, let me see what I did inside my login. Inside my login, oh, I never called my function. So let me put my function back in so it actually calls it. And what's in my function here? Sign in. And sign in, email password, and returns my promise. We're just going to try catch. If successful, we're going to redirect. Otherwise, we're going to just set their error. Let's try this again. Why do I keep typing 300, not 3000? There we go. Let's try this again. Okay, so it authenticated me, but I'm still getting, all right. Redirected to sign in. Hit my app index loaded, so I'm authenticated. Let's go to my tab 2. And, oh, yeah, I have the same issue as before where I need to check the response. I'm just setting it without checking it, right? So, and we shouldn't do it. Let's move this. Let's take this here, put this down here. We're just going to say response failed. I mean, sign in failed. If the request is not okay, we'll throw our error exception. And then down there, if it is okay, then we get the response. But once again, we also want to make sure that we actually have a user. So if we don't have a user, then once again, we'll throw no error. Otherwise, we do, and we'll update our state using the response information that we got back from the user. So now let's actually try to log in with the user. Let's confirm our users, not admin@mail.com. Well, first let's check our error handling. So if I just click sign in and it fails, let's go back to our login page and set error, sign in fail, please try it again. Set error. Here's my error, it's supposed to be displayed at the top. So, am I throwing my error? Let's see. No, I'm just catching it, I'm not throwing it. So, after I do all this stuff, now let's try again. All right, sign in failed. All right, that's what we wanted. And we checked, and our user is not admin@mail.com. And we signed in with our not admin@mail.com. And not now. Let's go over to tab 2, and we can see that we got our user information. Remember the code we put in earlier. And look at tab 2. Where's tab 2? Tab 2. And you can see we just got the current user information and dumped some information about the current user so that we know we're actually authenticated. And then you see when I refresh the page how I don't have to log in again. And the reason why I don't have to log in again is if I take a look at my context here. When I restart the app, it calls this use effect inside of my context, which then calls init. Init tries to find a user based on the credentials that it has. If it doesn't find the user, it clears and bails. Otherwise, it takes the user, it sets my current state. And since I have state and I have a user, I end up on my tab 1 page, which means that I'm authenticated. And there's my current user that I had. So it's managing that for me. Okay, since we have this, let's get sign out done. Let's just quickly, let's get sign out and sign up done pretty quickly here. We are going to follow the exact same pattern that we have here. If we look at, we have our handle sign in. Let's remove this console log. We don't need it. We know it's working. And it has this login page, this login route. And if we go back to our REST API documentation, it looks like there's no specific auth operation around create account. It's basically just adding a user. So it's going to be this kind of create method here. So let's quickly put that in, and we'll do the same thing as before. We'll just drop in some source code for the UI. So let's get that going. First, let us create our page. So we have our login page. Let's create our new page. Like I said, we're just going to drop some code in for that. All right, so we have our source code in for our sign up page. Very similar as before. We have provided some style sheet. Actually, let's see if we can show the page. How am I going to show the page? I forgot there's like an order of operations. I have no way to log out, so I can't get to that sign in page. Let's add the logout button first. We're just going to quickly put a logout button in here on tab 2 so we can log out and show the sign up page. So let's go to tab 2, tab 2. We'll steal some styles. So we'll go to our sign up page and we'll steal our button information. And we'll add this button on the bottom of our page. We'll style this page later. Get our imports. Let's go to tab 2 so we can see how it's coming along. We're just going to take our button style. Okay, let's go to tab 2. Why does it say sign up? I need sign out. And then now we need to implement sign out. Let's see what we have in our session. We have sign out. Let's go to our session and find our sign out function. Let's see what the doc gives us. So let's go down to logout. This time I've learned my lesson. I'm just take the whole thing. I'm just going to copy the whole thing. We'll come in here. We'll drop that no matter what. So we'll put a finally. We'll clear all state. Get rid of that one down there. Clean all this up. We don't really care what we get back, just so long as we don't get an error. If we get this far, we're just going to return true. Otherwise, we're going to throw the error, which means the logout failed. So I guess we probably don't want to clear state if the logout failed. So actually, let's just clear state either way. No, actually, that's not the right thing to do. If the logout failed, we don't want to clear state. So we'll only clear state here. We'll remove the finally. All right, API uses logout. This should handle our logout. We clear our state. Let's go back to tab 2. Sign out should be here. We'll just call sign out and try. We'll wrap that in a try catch. And then we probably should, just to be polite, let's do our const error. And we will set error. Failed to sign out, please try again. Let's import our missing state. It's going to wait here. And let's make sure this is async. And that should be all we need. So let's go back over here. Let's see if we can sign out. All right, so did I get any errors? Nope, it looks like we signed out successfully. And it brought me back here. All right, so we did all this. Just take a look at our sign up page. So here's our sign up page. Disabled because I haven't entered anything, but if I go back to sign in, sign up. But what we want to do is we want to create a new user. Let's go here. We have our collection, create. This is the pattern. We've learned our lesson, so we're just going to actually, well, we see what it needs to look like, right? So let's just use our sign in because it has everything except for the name and the role. But the role is set by default, so we shouldn't have to set that. So let's go back to our context and we'll sign out. So let's put a little bit of doc in here. Sign up isn't done yet. Sign in is. All right. So since we're going to follow our pattern for sign in, we're just going to copy all the sign in code and we're going to replace all the sign up code with the sign in code. And then we'll update it. And we will, this should be users create. And we'll add the name to the body. And sign up failed. User not created. And then we update. If it throws the error, nothing happens. Otherwise, we update response with everything that we got from a created user. Otherwise, error signing up. clear all state and throw the error. Okay, let's go back to our sign up page, and we have our handle sign up method. We're passing our email, password, and our name, and if successful, we route back to home, which should then bring us to our tabs page. So let's give this a try. We'll say Expo user. All right, registration failed. Let's see if we got any better error than that. Let's see if we got an error on the console. Post API users create, got a 404. We're back to our access rules. So now let's go back to our backend and look at our access rules. We don't have our access rules here, so let's put them in there. So do I read, write, true? Everybody's true. All right, let me try and restart my server. All right, let's try and sign it up again. Oh, it's my mistake. There's no create. It's just a post. It's your normal get put post, so it's just a normal post. All I need to do is a post and pass the information. So let's try this again. Let's see if the user got created. I think I know what the problem is. I think I need to create the user and then actually log in with the user. I think that's why it's not working, but let's see. Yeah, so it created the user, so yeah, that's the problem. So after we execute this sign up successfully, if everything's good, right here, we're going to log the user in. And then we'll just use our handle sign in with the same credentials we had from before. So we'll just say await handle sign in with the email and password. The handle sign in will handle setting up the auth state and all the other stuff for us, and it'll throw an error if there's a problem. If it throws the error, it'll come back here and then it'll get caught in handles here. So let's try this again with our new changes. Why am I getting that registration failed error? Yet the user is being created. Yeah, so it's creating the users, but I'm getting a failed registration. Let's see. Handle sign up. Users being created. I never stopped to see what was the response I got back. I think that's what my error is. So let's go back to the documentation. And on a collection, on a create, which is just a post, I'm looking for a user object, and what I should be looking for is a doc object. So that's why everything's kind of going sideways. So let's fix that. Because maybe I don't actually need to sign in anyway. So let's back out this sign in. Let's check for, where am I? If response doc. So then if the response is a doc, then I got a user. Actually, I do need to do the sign in because I'm going to set the session information. And I think I'm only going to get it on the sign in. But basically, we're going to say if response doc, then go. And let's just console log the whole response also. So let's try one more time. Expo 3. And that was a ticket. Let's see what we got. So there's our document response. The user was successfully created, and then I authenticated. And then we know we're locked because when I reload, let's see, I got my current user 3, which is what I wanted. So now we have integrated authentication, sign out, getting user information into our application from Payload. This was a very heavy Expo Router section of the tutorial. So hopefully for those Expo folks out there, you found this very helpful. And the next section, we're going to start to do a little bit more now that we have the user authenticated.